All right, everybody, this here's part 3. Story 24, The Bad Boy Who Became a Knight. A man had one son who was a very bad boy. He played hooky most of the time, robbed birds' nests, killed birds, and was mean generally. His father didn't know this, since around home the boy was fairly good. He thought his son went to school every day and was as good as the average boy. And when people told him he wasn't, he wouldn't believe them. One day, a fair came to town, and the father and son rode in to see it on one horse. With the boy sitting behind, he thumbed his nose and stuck out his tongue at the people who passed, until the father finally realized what he was doing. When they got home, he gave him a hard whipping, and since he wasn't used to punishment, the boy was very angry. Soon after that, he stole bread, cheese, and money and ran away. As he got farther from home, he came to a deep woods and couldn't find his way out. When he had eaten the bread and cheese, he had no more food and was hungry, but didn't know what to do. Money wouldn't buy anything in the woods. Finally, he went to sleep and dreamed he was at the bottom of a pit, and his mother and father were reaching down, trying to help him. When he awoke next morning, an old man with whiskers down to his knees was standing over him. The man asked him why he was there, and the boy told him all that had happened. The old man took him home with him, gave him breakfast, and began to plan for his future. He asked about school, and the boy confessed he had gone as little. He had done as little as possible. The man said he must learn, and from then on, taught him himself, so that as time passed, he was well informed in the things he should have learned at school. The boy was glad to have food and shelter again, but he still didn't wash himself or say his prayers at night. Consequently, the old man told him what he expected him to do and how to do it. After that, he did as he was told. The man told him he could go in every room of the dwelling where they lived except one. When the boy was 21 years old, the man told him he must find a job. That so far he'd eaten without work, but from then on he must work. He said there was a king not far away who might need his help, since he kept a lot of sheep. Then the man provided him with good clothing, and the youth went to the king to ask for a job. The king's daughter looked out and saw him coming and thought he was a fine-looking young man. He got a job as sheep herder, and there had been trouble for the sheep watchers. Every one of those previously employed had disappeared. Evidently, each one had been killed, but no one knew just how or by what. The old man had given the boy a music box, and every evening when he got ready to take the sheep back, he played his music box, and the sheep followed him 2 by 2. The princess and king saw him from the window and remarked that he was like an officer leading an army. There was a lot of black drapery everywhere, evidently in mourning, but the youth did not know what it was for. Sometimes he would take his sheep into the forest, where the old man was, and talk things over. One day the old man asked him what news there was out in the world, and the youth told him about the black drapes. The foster father told him that was in mourning for the victims of the dragon. For a long time, he said, a poor person had to be sacrificed from time to time. But now, it seemed, the people had to draw lots or numbers, and the lot had fallen to the princess. Whoever drew a certain number had to be the next sacrifice. The man told him that at last he could go into the forbidden room, where evidently different suits of armor were stored, since the youth had made up his mind to fight the dragon. The first day, the old man provided him with a jet black horse, matching black armor suitable for a knight, and a sword. As a knight, the youth went to the king and told him not to send his daughter that day. Then he went to fight the dragon in its mountain lair. But the dragon said he didn't want to fight that day, to come back the next. The youth went back and told the old man, who said to go again the next morning. This time he rode a roan-colored horse and wore a matching knight's uniform. Again he warned the princess not to go, but again the dragon said he would not fight that day. On the third day, the young man rode out on a white horse and a still different knight's uniform. This time it was snow white, all glittering with jewels. He had talked with the old man before this third encounter, and the man had told him if he grew weak to think about him and also his horse. The third day, the dragon was ready to fight, but it seemed to be a hopeless match. Each time the youth cut off one of the 7 heads, it would jump back with a burst of flame and grow back in place, more firmly entrenched than ever. Naturally, the youth became weak and discouraged, and remembering the old man's words, he thought about the man and horse. Immediately, everything seemed to change. Now, whenever he cut off one of the dragon's heads, the horse charged upon it and kicked it 200 miles away. This went on until all the beasts' heads were off and kicked far away. After the fight with the dragon, the knight was exhausted from exertion and loss of blood and went to sleep. The princess, watching over him, had a doctor come and take care of him. When he regained consciousness, he told the princess he had had a refreshing sleep, and she informed him he would not be alive if the doctor had not saved him. She slipped a ring on his finger. When he was well enough to be out of the doctor's care, he went back to the old man in the forest, who told him he had still more things to do. When he went back to the palace to guard the sheep, he should bandage his ring finger as if it had been injured. There was to be a big celebration because of the dragon slaying, and the old man told him he should take his music box and play it. If he were offered a present, he was not to accept any money or valuables. He was to say that what he wanted was a glass of wine to be shared with the princess. When he went back the next day, playing his music box, he was offered a lot of money, but he wouldn't take it. He said all he wanted was a glass of wine to share with the princess. The king said this was an insult, since he was only a sheep herder, but the princess said, in honor of the dragon slaying, they shouldn't deny anyone his wish. So as the old man had told him, he drank the wine first, and then dropped the ring she had given him into the glass. When the princess was ready to drink, the ring went against her mouth, and she realized he was the dragon slayer. She told the king he was the man who had killed the dragon, and they begged him to stay on at the palace. But he told them he could not do this, that he was a sheep herder and had work to do. Then he went back to the old man in the forest, and when he got back, the man said he must do one thing more. He must cut off his foster father's head. The youth said he couldn't do this, but the old man said he must, that he had lived too long already, 250 years, and had been a wicked man. He said his father had been a king, and he had killed his 2 brothers, and then his father. While dying, the father had placed a curse upon him and said he would never forgive him until his heart was burned in flames. At the same moment, the palace or castle where they lived had sunk into the ground. Again, the old man asked the youth to cut off his head and quarter his body, so that his heart could be burned in flames, and he could go to his rest. And the young man did as he was told. Following the old man's direction, the youth went to the place where the castle had sunk in the ground to fulfill his promise. When he had burned the heart, a voice from a bird spoke, saying, "Son, I forgive you." He knew then the old man's soul was at rest. At the same time, the sunken castle and buildings rose up from the ground, and since the boy owned these, there was no need now for him to feel that he was not of equal rank with the princess. Preparations were made for a huge wedding with feasting and dancing. However, the boy told the princess He wanted to go home and see his parents first. So he did, in his dirty sheep-herding clothes and his raggedest ones. The princess decided she too would visit throughout the realm and get to know her people. The boy's parents were glad to see him, dirty or otherwise, but when they heard the prince's coming, they hid him in an empty room. However, while she was talking to them, he yelled out, "I want to see that princess too." So the princess asked to see him, much to the parents' embarrassment, but the embarrassment was not for long. Soon the boy excused himself long enough to dress up in his jeweled armor. Now he looked handsome in his fine armor, and his parents were proud of him. The boy told them that he and the princess were going to be married, and that the old man had made him his heir. He said that he now had a castle finer than the king's, where he and the princess would live. The parents and everyone for miles around were invited to the wedding, which was an unusually large one, with dancing, drinking, and feasting going on for days. All right, story 25. The Two Brothers. Two brothers, John the younger and William the older, started out to seek adventure. They walked along together until they came to a spring. There was a road leading to the right, and another road went to the left of the spring. William chose the right, and John took the left. "Now, when we come back homeward," said William, "and come to this spring, observe carefully the water in it. It is clear, and so it shall be if all is well with us both. But if the water in the spring is blood, then death has befallen one of us." They bade farewell to each other, and on they walked. Soon William came to a forest through which he wandered till night came on. He was tired, sleepy, and hungry. He made himself a bed and proceeded to build a fire. He took from his knapsack a piece of bacon and a piece of bread. He then took his penknife from his pocket and was about to cut a switch from a tree above him when he heard a weird sound. "Ooh, I'm cold. Ooh, I'm cold," said the voice. William looked up through the branches and beheld an old woman sitting there shaking and shivering. "Well, if you're cold, come down and warm yourself," he said. The old witch scrambled down and sat near the fire. William went on, getting ready his supper. He put a piece of bacon on the end of his stick, then held it over the flame. When the grease began to drip, he would hold it over his bread and let it drip on it. "Ooh, I'm hungry," said the old witch. No sooner had she said this when off she scrambled to a nearby brook. She soon came back with frogs and lizards on a stick. Seating herself near William, she held her supper over the flame to roast, just as William did. Still shaking and quivering every once in a while, she jostled her lizards and frogs against William's bacon. William became angry. "Stop touching my bacon with your old frogs and lizards." All in vain did he speak, for the old witch continued to shake and shiver and to hit William's bacon every now and then. By now, William was thoroughly disgusted, so he packed up his belongings and left the old woman sitting by the fire. The old woman muttered a curse as William went out of sight. He wandered on through the night. At dawn, he arrived at a village. Although it was very early as yet, he could see people hurrying and scurrying about the streets. He stopped a man and asked him what was the matter. "Oh," said he, "today at 10 o'clock is the day of the king's daughter is to be given to the dragon in the well unless someone dare try to destroy him. But no one will try because all the brave men who have tried have been killed. There are no brave ones left. You see, this is the only well in this village, and if the princess is not delivered to the dragon, all the people will die of thirst, for the dragon will not permit us to get water." The man then hurried on. William walked on slowly. Every house had a black draping hung upon it. Every window, every porch showed signs of mourning. The nearer he came to the king's palace, the blacker things appeared. This made William become braver and braver. Up he walked to the king's door and announced himself as one wishing to tackle the monster. The king himself fitted him with the best sword and shield in the kingdom. As a reward, if he succeeded, he promised him the hand of the princess. Just before 10 o'clock, all the streets were cleared. Everyone was inside. Just as the clock struck 10, William walked up to the well. He heard a loud thundering sound. Up came the mighty monstrous dragon. A fierce look came upon his face as he saw William before him instead of the beautiful princess. Immediately he began thrusting fierce blows left and right. William managed to dodge a few of them. Several times his sword struck the dragon, but to no avail. His missed every vital spot. The dragon was too much for poor William. Soon he was dead. The dragon left a note on the well stating that he would await the princess at 10, just a week from that day. William was buried with all the reverence bestowed upon a brave knight. John slept well during the first night. He arose early and continued his journey through the forest. It was now breakfast time, so he found a nice spot under a large tree where he built a fire. With his penknife, he cut a branch from the tree. "Ooh, I'm so cold. Ooh, I'm so cold," said a weird voice above him. "If you're cold, come down and warm yourself by my fire," said John. Down came the old woman, shivering and quivering, wobbling and stumbling as she made her way to the fire. She had no sooner sat down when up she scrambled and away she went to the brook. Soon she came back with lizards and frogs on a stick. Seating herself beside John, she began roasting her breakfast. Many times did she flavor his bacon with lizards, but he said nothing. Once he moved over to give her more room, but never did he show signs of any anger, ill manners, or disgust. Both John and the old witch feasted heartily. John finally told her he had to go on. The witch thought he was a fine young man, and as a reward for his kindness, she gave him a small gold whistle, telling him to blow it when he was in danger and needed help. John thanked her kindly. Then, putting the whistle in his pocket, he wandered on through the woods. It was evening, and the sun had just dropped behind the hills, as John arrived at the village draped in black. A man was coming toward him. John questioned him, asking the reason for the blackness in the village. The man explained with grief that the king's daughter was to be given to the dragon in the well in a few days unless some brave man could destroy the monster and so save the princess. "Was there no man who would attempt to try to save her?" asked John. "Yes, there have been many, but all in vain. The dragon is fierce and mighty. Death befell all the brave ones." "How do I get to the king's palace?" asked John. "Straight ahead on that mournful hill." Away hurried John. On arrival at the palace, he was given good food and provided with plenty of rest for the following days, before the day for the duel with the dragon. On that sad day, John was furnished with the best sword and shield that could be found. By 10 o'clock, everyone was off the streets except John, who arrived at the well just as the clock struck the last note. A thundering sound roared out of the well. The great monster was before him. A fierce expression was on his hideous face as he saw John there instead of the beautiful princess. Nearer and nearer he came, but John jumped and rushed behind him. Down came the sword, but not hard enough. The dragon became more furious and sprang. Remembering his whistle, John quickly blew a shrill note that sounded through the village. Out of the woods came a great lion. "Roar!" went the lion. How surprised the dragon looked. Quick was John with his sword. Right under the dragon's neck went the shining blade. Red blood squirted everywhere. The lion sprang on the weakened dragon. Soon the monster was dead, and the lion returned to the woods. John went back to the palace, tired, but happy that the princess was saved, and the people would now have all the water they wanted. Great was the joy and merriment throughout the village. All the black drapings were burned, the wedding ceremony was performed, and all was well until John remembered his brother and longed to journey on. He persuaded his beautiful wife to go with him to look for his brother. On the morrow, they started for the woods. A few days later, they arrived at the spring at the fork of the road. Alas, the water was not clear. Red blood was seeping through the spring. John knew his brother had met death. So he and his wife went back home where they lived a happy life together. All right, story 26, John and the Giants. There was a shoemaker boy by the name of John, who was not much good at shoemaking. A caravan came along, and a fellow had his shoes broken, needing fixing. When he got them fixed, he asked John what he charged, and John replied, 4 cents. Just then a farmer came in selling cheese. John bought 4 cents worth and put the cheese on the table with his tools. Then another man came with broken shoes, and John had no time to eat the cheese. When he had finished the second man's shoes, John went to the cheese, and it was covered with flies. He took a piece of leather, hit the cheese with the leather, and then counted 1,500 flies he had killed. So he took a piece of ribbon and wrote on it, John Strongman with one slap killed 1,500 men. Then he put the ribbon around his head, walked around the city, and everyone looked at him and the sign. John walked on and came to the royal palace. The king was having a war with the giants. His daughter was on the balcony and saw John with the sign around his head. That's the man you want to kill giants, she said. The king sent 2 guards to get John. John said, what does he want? He pointed to the sign and said, see this sign? That's the kind of man I am. John went along to the royal palace. He told the king, now don't monkey around with me. I don't want any trouble. You see what kind of man I am? The king told him he wanted him to fight giants. John refused. The king said, you've got to go on penalty of death. John agreed to go. He started to walk toward where the giants were, but came to a cherry tree with ripe cherries. He decided to climb the tree and eat his last meal. While he was eating cherries, a bird came around, and John caught it in his hands and put it inside his shirt. Then he saw 3 giants coming. One said, I smell the little man. I'm going to have a good meal. John pointed to the sign. The giants cooled off a little. They invited him to join them. He said, don't mistreat me. He joined them. The giants decided they wanted to try John out. So how strong he was. So they came to where there was a big pile of stones. Said, let's throw a stone. See who can throw it the farthest. The giants took about a 50-pound stone apiece and threw it. John put his hand in his shirt and took out the bird. The bird was scared, so he flew, and the more far he went, the more high he got. The giants said, he passed our stone. They walked on and came close to the sea. Let me see here. Hold on, it's getting funky here. They had an iron ball that weighed about 100 pounds and decided to see who could throw it the farthest. John couldn't even lift it. He was weak. When it came his turn, he put 1 foot on the ball and yelled 3 times to tell them to look out over there. The giant said, what are you yelling about? John said he didn't want to kill anyone across the sea. So the giant said, well, never mind. We don't want to lose the ball. They walked on and came to the giant's house. John asked, where am I going to sleep tonight? The giant said, you sleep on the first floor and we'll sleep on the second. The giants held a conference about what to do with John. They were afraid of him. He was so strong. He had thrown the stone farther and could have thrown the ball to the other side of the ocean. The giant said, we've got to find some way to kill him. If we don't, he'll kill us. They decided to go down about the middle of the night with an iron bar and beat him to death. But John had heard all they said, so before they came down, he got out, put a log in his place, and crawled under the bed. The giants came down with an iron bar and beat for about half an hour. A bam, a bam. Then they went back upstairs. John got out from under the bed, took the log out, and went back to bed. The giants thought sure they'd killed him. Said he's finished now. Next morning, John was mad like a snake. Said to the giants, my bed's full of bed bugs. Bite me all night. The giants said, what you think of him? All that beating and he claims bed bugs bit him? The next night, the giants held another conference and decided to cut a hole in the floor. They had lots of logs to burn, and they decided to carry all these logs upstairs and throw them down on John's bed. John braced his bed good and strong and went under it again, because he had heard them talking. The giants dropped the logs and said, "Now he's finished." After a while, John got out from under the bed and yelled at the giants, told them not to walk around, said dust fell down in his eyes so he couldn't sleep, said if they didn't quit walking around, he'd kill all three of them. They said John was certainly a strong man. The next day, they had to get the water. Each of the giants took a 100-gallon barrel to get water, but John didn't want any. He asked for a rope, which the giants gave him. Each of the giants filled up the 100-gallon barrel, and John took the rope and started to put it around the well. The giants yelled at him and asked, "What are you doing?" John said, "I'm not going to fool around like you fellows. I'm going to bring the whole well." The giants said, "Let it go. If you bring the whole well, it might leak out." "Never mind, we'll carry the water." Then the giants decided to try John at eating, to see who could eat the most. John started to worry. He took a walk while the giants were making the mush and found a sheepskin. He took his shirt off and tied the sheepskin around his waist and his neck. When he put his shirt back on, John ate all his mush. One giant said, "I've got indigestion." John walked around and asked for a knife. When a knife was brought, he cut his sheepskin and let the mush fall out. Then the giant asked for the knife and said, "Didn't that hurt you, John?" "No, that didn't hurt." So the giant took the knife and cut his stomach open and fell down dead. Only 2 giants left then. The next day the giant said, "Let's go hunting, and when we see an animal or something, we'll motion." Soon a turkey came along and lit on the giant's shoulder. The giant motioned and John shot, but he didn't shoot the turkey. He shot the giant. Now there was just 1 giant left. The giant said, "I'll give you 3 mules and load them up with gold, and you go home. I won't make any more war on your king." John said, "All right, but no more war." After John left, another giant came, and when he found what had happened, he said, "We'll overtake him and get the mules and gold back." So they went after him. John looked back and saw the giants coming. He hid 1 mule and had 2 on the highway. Then he stood with 1 foot up in the air and looked at the sky. The giant asked him why he was standing that way, and John said he had just kicked one of the mules and he couldn't see it. The giant said, "What will we do if he kicked us? He kicked 1 mule and he can't even see it." The giants went back home. So John got the mule out, went back to the king, and married the princess. All right, story 27. Smart Miss McCool. Long, long ago, there lived a giant named Finn McCool. He was as tall as a house, and his ears were as big as pancakes. He was so strong he could pick up a bear and throw it like a ball. Finn McCool was very big and strong, but he was afraid of one thing. He was afraid of a bigger giant named Cucullin. Not only was Cucullin bigger than Finn, but also he had a magic finger, which made him stronger than Finn. Cucullin had given every giant around a good beating, all except Finn McCool. He told everyone he was going to beat Finn too, just as soon as he could catch him. One day, Finn told his wife about Cucullin. Even though Miss McCool was so small, she could sit in Finn's hat. She was not afraid of Cucullin. She told Finn that she would help him. Miss McCool began to bake some cakes. In all the cakes except one, she put a stone. Finn was very puzzled. He could not see how this could help him against a giant with a magic finger. Then Finn saw Cucullin coming. His wife told him to get into the baby's bed, for she planned to tell Cucullin that Finn was a baby. Cucullin came to the door and asked if this was the home of Finn McCool. Miss McCool told him that this was Finn's house, but that Finn had gone to look for the giant Cucullin, and she felt sorry for him. Cucullin couldn't understand this, so she started to show him how big and strong her baby was. Miss McCool asked Cucullin to sit down and have a cake. The giant bit into the cake and broke a tooth on the stone that Finn's wife had baked in it. She then gave one of the cakes to the baby, the one without the stone. When the baby gobbled the cake right down, Cucullin was amazed. Then Miss McCool asked Cucullin if he would like to feel the baby's teeth. When Cucullin put his fingers in Finn's mouth, Finn bit off the magic finger. At this, the giant Cucullin ran from the house screaming that if this baby was so big and strong, he didn't want to run into the father. Finn climbed out of the baby bed, and he and his clever wife were never bothered by Cucullin again. Story 28, Lucky and the Giant. One day, Lucky wanted to go fishing, but when he got to the river, he could not believe his eyes. The river was gone. He ran all the way home to tell his father there was no river, because he was a farmer and needed the water to grow his crops. Lucky's father was concerned. He decided to trace the river to its source to see what was wrong. He followed the dry riverbed into the hills, and there in front of him was a lake made by the giant Elmo, who was wading in it. Elmo looked down, saw Lucky's father, and told him that he wouldn't give back the river unless he could perform a task. The man agreed, even though he knew that if he failed, he would have to work for the giant for 7 years. Elmo laughed and then put one foot on the hill and one in the valley. He told Lucky's father that he must do the same, put one foot on the giant's land and one foot on his own land. The man admitted he could not do this, and the giant said he must work for him for 7 years. When Lucky's father did not come home that evening, the mother became worried and early the next morning started out to look for him. She soon came upon him working in Elmo's field. The giant offered her the same opportunity as he had her husband. She agreed, thinking the big fellow stupid looking. Elmo posed the task of putting the same rock into 2 boxes at one time. The woman admitted she could not do this, so the giant said she must work for him for 7 years. When afternoon came and his parents did not come home, Lucky became worried and started to look for them. On his way, he picked up some things that he wished to save. When he got to the place where his father was working in the field and his mother in the kitchen, he told the owner he had come for his parents. The giant said that he must do tasks to free them. Lucky agreed, so the giant set him the task of standing with 1 foot on Elmo's land and 1 foot on Lucky's father's land. This was no problem for Lucky, since he happened to have some dirt from his father's land with him. Then the giant said that he must put a rock into 2 boxes at the same time. This was no problem for Lucky either, because he had a pebble and 2 small boxes with him, one large enough to contain the other. These tasks freed Lucky's parents, but the river was still a prisoner of the giant. To free the river, Lucky agreed to do one more task. This time, he was to take out all the water from the lake with a spoon. This was no problem for Lucky either, because he had a small spoon with him. Lucky took the spoon and began to dig at the base of the dirt wall holding the river back to form the lake. Soon, the water began to trickle through, and the river was freed from the giant. Now that the river was once again free, Lucky and his parents went home and were never again troubled by the giant Elmo. Okay, story 29, Mosquitoes. Far away in the mountainous region of Europe, there lived a man, his wife, and their son. One day, out of the mountains, came a man-eating monster who devoured the man and wife. The boy, Olaf, was away and was spared the same fate. When he returned and found that his parents had been killed and eaten, he swore vengeance upon the killer. He began searching for the monster at once, but many years passed before he found him. Olaf drew his sword, and the battle began. He stabbed the creature many times, but could not kill him. The monster, seeing that he was losing, fled. Olaf knew he would have to find some other method of killing him. He dug a large pit, put a plentiful supply of wood on the bottom, and then covered it up. When the monster came by, Olaf chased him toward the pit, and he fell in. Olaf then threw a burning torch into the pit and set the wood on fire. Before the creature died of fumes and flames, he shouted to Olaf. He swore that even though he would be burned up, he would not die. His ashes would go out in the world, blown by winds to the four corners of the earth, and these would be small, man-eating creatures. This is how mosquitoes were brought onto earth. All right, story 30. The Ring. Once there lived a family of 6 people, the father, mother, and 4 children. When the father died, the mother and children were left to shift for themselves. The mother would make tablecloths, and John, the oldest boy, would deliver them on the days when he was not in school. They lived in a rented house and had very little for food. One Saturday, when John had delivered a tablecloth and was on his way home, he saw some boys beating a dog. He begged the boys to leave the dog alone, but they paid no attention to him until he offered them the money he had received from the tablecloth. Then he was allowed to take the dog. When he arrived home, his mother asked for the money, but John told her he had lost it. The dog he had rescued was crippled and bloody. He said he had found the dog along the way. After this, his mother made another tablecloth and asked John to deliver it, and not to lose the money. However, when John was coming back home, he met the same group of boys. This time, they had a cat and were beating her to death. John again asked them to leave the cat alone, but they refused until John gave them the money which he had received from the tablecloth and took the cat in return. When he got home, his mother asked for the money, but John only told her the same story. His mother became very impatient and whipped him. After she had made another tablecloth, she told John to deliver it and to make sure that he did not lose the money. On his way back, he met the same group of boys. This time they were torturing a snake. Since John did not like to see animals treated in such a manner, he again asked the boys to leave the snake alone. But again they refused until John had given them money he had received from the tablecloth. John was afraid to go home for fear his mother would beat him. He began to run very fast and got very tired. After a while, he stopped to rest under a tree. It wasn't long before he was fast asleep. All of a sudden, he felt something over his body. When he awoke, he saw the snake that the boys had let loose. The snake dropped a ring which it had in its mouth on his lap. John looked at the ring and began to shine it, because he thought if he could sell the ring, he could get some money and give it to his mother for the 3 tablecloths. When he started to clean it, a very old and ugly lady with buck teeth, her hair sticking straight up in the air, a big red nose, and ugly face appeared and looked at him. John was afraid and tried to run away but could not move, so he shut his eyes. When he opened his eyes, he saw the old woman was gone and began to run. Soon he was so tired that he had to rest again. Again he started to clean the ring, still hoping that he might be able to sell it, and again the old lady appeared. This time he was not afraid, and when the woman asked him what he wanted, he said $20. The old lady gave him $20 and disappeared. John was very happy. When he got home, he gave his mother the money, but did not tell her anything about the old lady or the ring. The next day, he was still thinking about selling the ring, but when he began to shine it, the old lady appeared again. Again, he asked for $20, and she asked him why he didn't ask for more, so that she wouldn't have to come so often. John said, "I didn't call you." But the old lady said, "Yes, you did. Every time you touch the ring, I must appear. I am under the command of the ring. Any time you want something, just call me and I'll come." 2 or 3 days later, John bought a farm for his mother and the rest of the family to live on, and paid for it with the money he had received from the old lady. 2 years later, he got married and built a better home than the first one. The people could not figure this out. They began to suspect him of being a robber. One day, while he was hunting, he left the ring at home for fear that he would lose it. Another fellow, who had read about the magic book and ring, wanted to get hold of the ring. The only thing he could think of was to go around and ask John's wife if she would like to trade any old gold for new. John's wife knew that he had wanted to sell the ring when he first got it, so she thought that she would do well to sell it now and get a new ring and surprise John. She picked the best ring out of the ones she saw and gave the fellow John's ring. When John arrived home, however, he became very angry because he knew that he could never find a ring like that one. Because he was suspected of robbery, John was arrested by the police. The dog asked the cat what they were going to do, since they would not be able to get food from John. Since the dog and cat were witches, they spied on the fellow and knew who had the ring. They knew that he kept it in his mouth every night when he went to sleep. Since they were unable to get it from him, they called upon a rat. They told the rat that he must do them a favor. If he would do them this favor, he would never have to be afraid of any more cats or anything. Even his family would be protected for 7 generations. They told the rat that he must get the ring from the man. The rat said that he would do it. He went into the house and looked around all day long. When the man went to bed, the rat noticed that he had taken the ring from his finger and put it in his mouth. After the man began to snore, the rat found some oil. He dipped his tail in it and then found some pepper and did likewise. When he then walked backward with his tail in the air, being careful not to rub off the oil or pepper. He put his tail in the man's nose, and the man began to sneeze and dropped the ring on the floor. The rat then took the ring and ran outside where the cat and dog were waiting. They told the rat not to worry, that for 7 generations he would not be bothered. The dog and cat then brought the ring to the jail. John heard the cat mew and the dog bark and asked the jailkeeper to let him see his dog and cat for the last time. The cat came in, jumped on his lap, and gave him the ring. He squeezed the ring, and the old lady appeared. John had one request, and that was that he be allowed to go home to his wife. When he got home, he found a lady in the kitchen who told him that he had saved her life. John said that he could not see how he had saved her life when he had never seen her. She asked him who had given him the ring. John told her that a snake had given it to him, but she said, "No, it was I. I was the snake who gave you the ring." She told John that the boss of the witches had punished her and changed her into a snake. She told him if he had not tried to save her, she would have been killed. Then she told him to go to his wife. And as she said those words, she disappeared, and the cat and dog turned into real people. John thanked her and thanked the dog and cat for all they had done. All right, story 31, The 3 Brothers. A king had 3 sons, and one day he called them in and told them he was going to die. He asked one of them to watch over his grave every night after he was dead. Neither of the 2 older boys would take his turn, so the youngest watched for each of them, and then watched at his turn too. The first night, the father appeared from the grave, gave his youngest son a magic switch, and then went back into his grave. The second night, he gave his son a ring, telling him that whatever he wanted, he could have. The third night, the father came from the grave again and said, "Son, you watch me." And the son answered, "Yes, I'm not afraid." That night, the father gave him a magic horse. The youngest son didn't tell anybody about seeing his father or receiving the magic gifts. There was another king who had an only daughter, and the girl lived on a glass hill. All 3 brothers wanted to win this princess, but there was no way of getting up the glass mountain. The 2 older brothers tried 2 days in succession, sharpening the shoes of their horses' feet, but they did not succeed, and the king, the father of the girl, whipped them for even trying both days. The youngest son made three wishes. He wished for a golden pear, a golden apple, and a golden shoe. And because of his magic gifts, he got them all. Every day he rode a different colored horse, first a black one, then a roan one, and on the third day a white horse, and he wore a suit of white armor. He rode up the glass mountain and gave the girl the things he had wished for, the golden pear, the golden apple, and the golden shoe. He was able to climb the glass mountain even though his older brothers were not, because of the magic horse his father had given him. While he was with the princess, she gave him a ring, and he gave her a ring in exchange, but not the magic ring that his father had given him, of course. The princess liked the youngest son and liked the gifts he had brought, which she showed to her father. The king was surprised, as he did not know anyone had climbed the mountain, but he was pleased with the presents and said, "Who is this prince who gives one golden shoe, one golden apple, and one golden pear?" And he said whoever it was could marry his daughter, if he could find out who it was. So the youngest son went to him, although he was dressed almost in rags, but he seemed to have no shame about his clothing. "Mr. King," he said, "I would like to marry the young princess, your daughter." But the king said, "Oh, go on, get out of here. You're dirty." The youngest son said, "All right, I'm dirty, but I'm good." And the king said, "How are you good?" Then the youngest son took the ring he had obtained from the princess and threw it up the glass mountain to her. And the princess called, "Father, that one, that's the one." Then the youngest son dressed up in good clothing, and the king had no further objections. So he and the princess were married, and the two older brothers left the country. Story 32, The Bewitched Princess. Once there was a young man who wanted to be married and have a home, but nobody would marry him. And he was so unhappy that he decided to hang himself. He took a rope, went to the woods, tied the rope to a high limb of a tree, made a loop, and was about to put the loop around his neck, when he heard a voice say, "Stop, don't do that." He took the loop from his neck, looked around, but didn't see anything. So he said, "Well, something fooled me. I'm going to put the loop around my neck and go on with the job." He put the loop back around his neck when something called, "Wait, boy, don't do that. Don't hang yourself." He looked around again and didn't see anything. So he said, "This time I'm going to put the loop around my neck and go through with it. Nobody's going to fool me." So he took the loop, put it around his neck, and again the voice called, "Stop, don't hang yourself. I like you." He took the loop from his neck, looked all around again, and at the foot of the tree lay a huge snake. The snake gave him some money and told him to go to the priest and make plans for a wedding. "Go to the priest and give him that money," she said. "I'm going to marry you." While the young man was making the marriage arrangements, the priest asked, "What's the name of your wife to be?" "I don't know," the man said. "She didn't tell me her name." The priest said, "Oh, well, I'll just give her the name of Mary. Never mind." And he set down the name Mary. When the young man returned to the woods, the snake asked, "What name did he give me?" "Mary." "That's the right name," she said. "That's my name, Mary." This time the snake told the man to take as much money as he needed and get carpenters to build a fine building with 365 rooms. So the young man saw that the building was constructed and paid everything. When he had finished all this, the snake said he should get a different kind of bird for each room, so he did. He went out and bought different kinds of birds, crows and all, and put a different kind in each room. Then the snake told him to go to the butcher and tell him to have plenty of meat ready for a year's feasting, and the butcher agreed that he would. Then, with everyone invited for miles around, the wedding took place. However, it was a strange wedding with no bride present. When the man sat down at the table, he sat by himself. There was no woman with him. When he ate, he put one spoon in his mouth and another in his bosom. When he drank whiskey, he put the glass to his bosom and then to his mouth, and beer the same way. Everyone wondered where the bride was. When it was time for the wedding, they all went to the church, and everyone said, "How is that fellow going to marry? He doesn't have a woman." When the man came to the church, the priest looked at him and said, "Where's your intended wife?" And the young man said, "No matter where she is, she's with me, so it makes no difference." Just then a woman's hand reached from the man's bosom. The snake, which was wrapped around his waist so that it could be fed and not attract too much attention, had turned human for the time of the wedding. As a result, it had a natural hand to have the ring put on, so that the priest could read the ceremony. When the priest saw the woman's hand, he changed rings, went on with the ceremony, married them, and gave them his blessing. Then the man gave him some money and went home, and nobody saw the woman at all. That night the man ate his supper as he had before. He put one bite of food in his bosom and one in his mouth, and fed the snake in that way. When it was time to go to sleep, the snake turned upside down, took off her skin, threw it under the bed, and turned into a beautiful young woman. The mother of the young man and her daughter, the little flower girl, were looking in at the keyhole as they were curious about the bride. When the little girl saw what had happened, she went to her mother, saying, "Mother, he's got a nice little woman, and she's awfully pretty." She took the snake skin off, threw it on the floor, and turned into a woman. "I saw it through the keyhole. What are you going to do about it?" The mother said, "I'm going to watch my chance and do something to that snake skin. I'm going to burn up that skin." And she did, about 5 or 6 nights later, when the young people were asleep. The next day, a number of wealthy people came to the wedding feast. One man was especially wealthy and owned all the woods around a certain section, so that he was very influential. He wanted to dance with the bride, but he was not respectful and made improper advances, so she slapped his face and told him to go home. The wealthy man was angry at this lack of respect for his rank. "All right," he said, "since you are so smart, suppose that you clear off and clean up all that hill, some 100 acres of brush back of this dwelling, within the next 24 hours. The princess sent her husband and his mother to do the work at first, saying that the mother had burned up the skin and now she must do the work, and she kept on dancing. When it came noontime, however, she was kind enough to take them their lunch. Then she sent the mother home, put her husband to sleep, and accomplished the task of clearing off the entire woods, cleaning up the great hill by magic. The next day, the wealthy man came again. When he saw that the entire hill and all the woods had been cleared, he said, 'You were smart enough to accomplish my first task, but you won't be able to do my second.' But the princess said, 'Well, we shall see.' The wealthy man said, 'Go down to the river near the big rock quarry and build a bridge across the river so that it will hang by one hair.' The wealthy man left again, and the princess told her mother-in-law and her husband to do the work for her. The young man started to build the bridge, working here and there, this way and that way, but he couldn't do anything. Then the princess came, brought them their lunch, sent them home, and built the bridge herself. The wealthy man came back the next day, went out on the bridge, came to the middle, and fell down into the river and drowned." Story 33, The Girl with No Hands. When the Queen of Persia was on her deathbed and knew she was going to die, she made the king promise that when he married again, it would be only to someone who looked exactly like her. After the queen's death, the king searched for 3 years to find someone who looked like his wife, and then realized that his daughter was the image of her mother. So he determined to marry her. However, the daughter, rather than marry her own father, requested to be killed. As a result, the king made plans to have her put to death, asking that the executioners bring back her tongue, an eye, and her hands as proof of her death. When the executioners went to kill the girl, they were unable to do so, as the sword would not cut. Something held the sword back, evidently some magic to save her life, so that they could chop her head, couldn't chop her head off. Since they had to take back proof of her death, they decided to kill a large dog instead, and take an eye and tongue from it, and the hands from the girl. After the girl had sworn that she would never come back to her father's kingdom, the executioners took the proofs back to the king. Then the girl set out and traveled until she came to another country. The king of this country had a golden pear tree, and something was taking the pears, but the guards could not seem to find out what it was, or to catch the thief. Many guards had been put to death for going to sleep on their jobs, and finally the king had set his sons to guarding the pear tree. The 2 older ones watched successfully, but found nothing, since both of them went to sleep. When it was the 3rd son's turn to watch, he fixed up thorns for his head so he wouldn't go to sleep and would see whatever was stealing the pears. He opened one eye and saw a vision in white. A woman came in. When he asked whether she were a good or bad spirit, a voice said, "Good spirit." He sat up then and saw it was a girl with no hands. Taking his overcoat, he covered up the girl and hid her. Then he went to his father and asked him if he would give him what he had found. The father agreed, and the boy told him he had found a girl without hands, and he wanted to marry her. The father consented. He said she could have artificial hands, so the young couple were married. About this time, the girl's father found out that she was not dead, that she had run away and the executioners had deceived him, and he was very angry. He had the executioners put to death and made war on the king who had rescued his daughter. In those days, the kings actually fought each other, just as the regular soldiers did. The king's son, the girl's husband, had to go off to fight in this war and told his wife to be sure to use the seal whenever she wrote to him, so that he would know it was she. However, the stepmother, who was jealous of the girl, found and stole the seal and wrote letters using the seal herself. She wrote a letter pretending it was the son who had written it, used the seal and signed his name, urging that the father take the girl and burn her alive. The king read the letter and thought it was from his son, but he did not want to burn the girl alive, so he made a dummy to look like her and burned it. He told the girl she had better go away, that there had been a plot against her life. So the girl thanked him and went away. She passed a creek and saw a wild hog with only 3 legs. Some hunter had evidently shot off one leg, run into the creek, and come out with 4 legs. The creek evidently had some magic healing powers, so she decided to restore her hands, and she did. From that time on, she had 2 good hands. She was expecting a child, so it was hard for her to travel through the woods, but she kept going. Finally, she came to a house with livestock on the place, but no one was there. She went in and stayed all night, and when a few days passed and nobody came, she started to do the work and take care of the stock. Her son was born, and when he was about 3 years old, some people came. The first people she had seen since she came there, 2 men, one of whom was rather elderly. They asked about the boy, and she said he was fine, except that he wasn't baptized. So St. Peter, for the two men were St. Peter and Jesus, baptized him and gave him the name of Peter. When they started away, St. Peter suggested that since he was godfather to the boy, Jesus should go back and tell the mother that when the child was 12 years old, he would ask something of God, and whatever he asked would be granted to him. The king's son came home from the war and went to his wife's room, but she was gone. So he went to his father and said, "Where's my wife?" The king replied, "You wrote a letter telling me to burn her alive, and I did." The boy didn't like this news, and when the king saw that he didn't, he told his son that he hadn't burned the girl, that she had gone back to wherever she came from. The son started looking for his wife with a large number of men to help him, but he couldn't find her. Finally, when all the men had died of hardships, but the prince and his valet, the 2 men came to the woman's cottage and decided it would be best to take turns sleeping. The woman recognized her husband, but said nothing. While he was sleeping, the prince's hand fell down, and the mother told the boy to put his hands back under the cover. The boy did not want to do this, but the mother spanked him, and he did. Later, something dropped from the prince's pocket, and the mother asked the boy to put it back on the bed for him, and again had to spank him to get him to do it. The prince's guard watched over him, and when he awoke, told him what he had seen. "You know," he said, "I believe that's your wife." But the prince pointed out that this woman had real hands, and his wife didn't. The guard told him about the mother spanking the boy to get him to do things with her hands. Afterward, the prince came and sat down and asked questions of the boy's mother. The guard had said she looked like his wife, and she did. The boy asked, "Mama, what makes this red strip on your hands?" The woman explained that the strip was there where her hands grew. She said, God gave me these hands." Then the prince was convinced that it was his wife and asked how they could go home, since it had been such a perilous trip there, with so many deaths, and had taken so long. Of the whole regiment that had gone out in search of the wife, only these two had survived. The wife said, "It will be easy going home. The boy will ask the good Lord, and he'll give him what he asks." The mother asked the boy, after telling him what she'd like, and the boy wanted it too, to ask the Lord for whatever he most wished, and his wish would be granted. The boy went out and whistled. He made the wish, and also wished he could take his stable and cows with him, and in about 2 minutes they were back home. However, the mother and the boy were concealed in a little house back of the palace. The king asked his son what he thought should be done with the stepmother, what he was going to do to her, and the son said nothing. He said it was the father's problem. So the king asked the stepmother herself. He asked her what she thought she'd done with a person who had done such things as causing an innocent person to be burned alive, and the stepmother suggested that such a person should be hitched to 4 horses and torn to pieces. So that's what they did to her. All right, story 34, the switch, the tablecloth, and the harmonica. There were 3 boys in a family. The father was dead, and the 2 older boys would go out to work on a farm. The older boys wanted the little boy to go out and work too, and he did. His big brothers whipped him, so the little boy started to cry and ran away from them. He went into the woods and came to a place where 3 girls were asleep, with the sun shining right on their faces. The boy decided to get some brush to cover the girls' faces so the sun wouldn't shine on them. The girls awoke and said, "Little boy, what are you doing here?" The boy said, "My brothers whipped me because I was late getting to work, so I ran away." The girls said, "You're a nice boy." Each one gave him something to protect himself. The first one gave him a switch and said, "Swing this switch and ask for whatever force you want. With enough soldiers, you can whip anybody, your brother, mother, or anybody else." The second girl gave him a tablecloth. She said, "Whenever you're hungry, spread this tablecloth, and any food you want will be delivered." The third girl gave him a harmonica. She said, "Whenever you play, everyone will have to dance, even cows and horses." The boy accepted this too and went back to his brothers. One brother said, "Now I'm going to whip you again for running off." The boy took out the switch and asked for 10 soldiers to whip his brothers until they promised to do what was right by him. After this, all 3 went home. The family was poor, and there was not much to eat. So the little boy told his mother he was going to fix the meal. He asked for a chicken for each one of them and a loaf of bread, and there it was. It appeared from nowhere when he spread the tablecloth and asked. They ate the good supper, but they were all worried. What had happened to the little boy? Next morning, the boy got up and went to the king's palace. The princess, sitting on the balcony, saw the boy and said he was nice looking. The boy had done something, so the police arrested him and took him to the king. The princess was happy to see the boy. The king looked at him and asked how old he was. The boy said 14 years. The king said he wouldn't punish him, that he was too small. The princess, who was also 14 years old, begged her father not to punish the boy. The boy said he was out looking for his fortune. The king asked him to stay for dinner, but they prepared a poor table for him. The boy wouldn't eat, so the king asked him why. The boy asked the king if he wanted a good dinner then. Taking his tablecloth, he asked for cake, wine, and everything else, and invited all the royal family to eat with him. After they had eaten, the king took the tablecloth away from the boy and wouldn't give it back. The boy told him about the switch and called for 1,000 soldiers. They were about to choke the king to death, so the king said, "All right, here's your tablecloth." The princess asked him to sleep there that night, but when the boy was asleep, the king sent his soldiers to take the switch and the tablecloth away from him. And they did. Then they put the boy in jail. While he was in jail, lunchtime came, and the keepers fed poor food to the ones in jail. So the boy told them not to eat it. He said, "Don't eat that stuff. We're going to have a good meal." When the sheriff saw that the prisoners wouldn't eat the food, he reported this to the king and said, "It might be that boy you caught." So the king, queen, and princess came into the jail to see what was the matter. When the king came in, he put all the blame on the boy. The boy said, "Give me back my switch and my tablecloth, or I'll kill you." The king said that the switch and tablecloth wouldn't work for him as they did for the boy. He had asked for soldiers, but they hadn't come. He had asked for food, and it hadn't come. The boy asked the king again to give back the tablecloth and switch, but the king said no. So the boy took out the harmonica and started to play it. When he started to play, the king had to dance, the queen had to dance, the princess had to dance, the sheriff and all the prisoners and everyone else. The king couldn't stand it, but the boy wouldn't stop until he had the tablecloth. He told the king unless he did the right thing, he would take his kingdom away from him. So the king gave him back the switch too and said he could marry the princess, and he did. All right, everyone, this is story number 35, The Bell of Justice. A Spanish prince had the misfortune to lose his eyesight. In order that his people might not be the worse for his loss, he hung a bell in his palace and decreed that anyone who had a wrong to be righted should pull the rope and ring the bell. When the bell rang, a judge would go down to hear the complaint and right the wrong. It happened that a serpent had its home under the end of the bell rope. It hatched its young, and one day, when the little serpents could leave the palace, it led them out for fresh air. While they were gone, a toad took a fancy to the place, and would not go away when the serpent returned. When the mother snake could not drive out the toad, it coiled its tail around the rope and rang the bell. The judge came down, but saw nobody, and went back. Again, the serpent rang the bell. This time the judge looked around with great care and saw the serpent and the toad. He went back to the prince and told him what he had seen. The prince told the judge that the toad had to be in the wrong, and to go down, drive out the toad, kill it, and let the serpent have its home again. All this was done. Not many days after, as the prince lay in his bed, the serpent entered the room and crawled toward the prince's bed. The servants were about to drive it out, but the prince forbade this. He felt that because he had done the creature a favor, it would do him no harm. The serpent glided up the bedpost, in its mouth with a precious stone which it laid on the prince's eyes. Then it slipped out of the room and was never seen again. The moment the stone touched his eyes, the prince's eyesight was restored, and he could see all well as any other man. All right, story 36, The Doe Prince. Once there was a princess who couldn't find a prince she could love, so she decided to make one. She mixed a doe and shaped it like a man, straight and tall and very handsome. When the princess kissed him, he came to life. She taught him to talk and walk, and he grew to be a fine young prince. They got married, and she loved him more and more each day. Because the bandits were causing a great deal of trouble in the country, the prince resolved to campaign against them, and in his pursuit followed them out of the country. This made the princess very sad because she didn't want him to leave. The prince, after many months of traveling, fell in with these thieves at a palace where they were hiding out in some far-off land. Now the queen of the palace fell in love with him and forced him to marry her. In order to keep the prince from escaping, she kept him drugged by giving him wine just before bedtime. In the meantime, the prince's wife, who had been left behind, decided to go out and hunt for her prince. After traveling for several months, she stopped to rest, and while she was resting, a little old man approached her. He told her where she could find her prince, and gave her 3 valuable stones. The little man told her to show the smallest stone first. The princess went to the palace, as the little man had directed, sat under a tree in the courtyard, and got out the smallest stone to examine. It glittered in the sunlight and caught the eye of the queen, who told one of her servants to bring the girl to her. When the princess was asked what she wanted for the stone, she asked to be allowed to sleep with the queen's husband one night. At first, the queen got angry and slapped her face, but remembering that he would be drugged, she consented. That night, the princess did everything in her power to awaken him, but she did not succeed. One of the servants overheard her and told her she would help her if she could. Now the next day, the princess again sat in the courtyard and got out the second stone. This one was brighter than the first, and it also caught the queen's eye. The princess again asked to sleep one night with her husband, and the stone would be hers. The queen consented, but the same thing happened as before. The prince did not wake up. The next day, the princess brought out her last stone, and again the queen wanted it. The girl asked for the same favor, which was granted. This time, the servant who had promised to help switched bottles and gave him plain wine instead of the drugged wine. That night, the princess woke him up, and he realized she was his princess. The servant helped them to escape and had horses ready for them. The prince later told all he knew about the bandits and got the people to rebel against them. With the bandits out of the way, they all lived peaceably thereafter. Hey y'all, this is episode 37, The 3 Wishes. Once upon a time, there was an old man who lived with his wife in a forest, far away from town. They lived on mushrooms, game, fish, vegetables from their garden, and fruit from their trees. They were happy and lived comfortably. One pleasant June evening, they were sitting in front of the house on a bench. Lightning bugs were flying about, some bright and some dim, but one was brighter than all the rest. At first it seemed far away, but as they watched, it kept getting bigger and brighter every minute, until it was as big as an apple and as beautiful as a diamond. All at once it burst into 1,000,000 pieces and lighted up the whole house, as if it were daytime. In fear, the old couple got up and started for the house. "Where are you going?" a pleasant voice asked. As they turned around, they saw a beautiful maiden with a wand in her hand that sparkled with diamonds. "Don't be afraid," she said in a song-like voice. "Who are you?" the old lady asked. "Are you an angel who has come to take one of us to heaven?" "Oh, no," said the lovely girl. "I am a fairy princess from the queen fairy, and I have come to fulfill 3 wishes for you within the next 3 days. Whatever you wish for in the next 3 days, you will receive. But be careful and don't make a mistake." As soon as she said this, she disappeared, and nothing was left but the lightning bugs. Surprised and excited, the old couple went into the house, not knowing what to wish. They hardly closed their eyes that night. The next day was much the same. All day long they thought, but could not decide what they would like best or wanted the most. "I wonder if it would be all right if I would wish I had wings and could fly like a bird," the old man mused. "Oh no, don't wish that. Some hunter might mistake you for an eagle and shoot you down. How would it be if I would wish to be young and pretty as I was when you married me?" "Oh no, dear," the old man jumped up in protest. "How would that look if you were young and I was old? What would people say? How could I go to church with you on Sunday? I want you just as you are now." And he kissed her tenderly. The day passed and the evening came without any decision about their wishes. As the old lady was cooking supper by the fire, The old man sat beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "I don't know what I would do without you," he said. "You make such tasty meals." "I wish I had a big piece of bologna," she said. "Then you would have a nice supper without having to wait for it." As she said that, an unusually large bologna sausage slid down the chimney. In surprise, the old folks stared at the tasty treat. "Look what you've done," the old man cried. "Couldn't you wish for something better than this chunk of meat?" "Ah, I forgot," she cried. "Such a stupid wish. Such absolute foolishness," he said. I wish the bologna would stick to your nose." No, no sooner had he said this than the bologna jumped up and stuck to the astonished woman's nose and hung like a turkey gobbler's snout, only much bigger and heavier. "Oh, pardon me, darling. I'm sorry. I forgot myself. What can we do now?" "Take that thing off my nose," she cried. He grabbed the end of it and started to pull, but the woman screamed out, "Don't pull, it hurts." What else can I do?" "Take a knife and cut it off," she said. He took his penknife from his pocket and started to cut the sausage. But she screamed again, "Ouch, ouch, stop, that hurts, leave it alone." They both cried over the mistakes they had made. She wouldn't be able to sleep with the big bologna dangling from her nose. I'm sorry. She wouldn't be able to sleep with the big bologna dangling from her nose, and in the morning, she couldn't wash her face. She couldn't do anything all day. What do we do? "Well, darling," he straightened up like a young boy, "we still have one more wish." His face shone with joy. "I wish the bologna would drop from your nose." The instant he said this, the bologna dropped to the floor. Their faithful old dog grabbed it, pulled it off to the doghouse, and that was the end of the bologna. After that, the old man and woman continued to live happily. All right, y'all, this is story 38, The Leprechauns. The leprechauns were leather workers and cobblers. Like all true Irishmen, they liked liquor, horses, songs, parties, dances, and fighting. These little people all dressed pretty much alike. They wore loafer-style shoes with large buckles and long white hose. Their pants came down below their knees, and their jackets were of the swallow's tail style, and with either silver or gold buttons. They all wore vests of some contrasting color, with white ruffled shirts made from good Irish linen. The color of their suits was green, a protective color, probably selected to help the leprechauns avoid detection. They also wore high-crowned hats with turned-up brims and usually a feather. It was indeed a known fact that any Irishman fortunate enough to catch a leprechaun was in luck for the rest of his life. To secure his release, the leprechaun would grant his captor 3 wishes. It is hard to tell how much time has been spent by the Irish people in fruitless searches for the leprechauns. Because the leprechauns loved music, dances, and parties, they would often come uninvited to Irish parties. Many a whiskey jug and punch bowl that became empty too quickly was credited to the leprechaun's love for liquor. At one time or another, every true Irishman has been made aware of the leprechaun. He has either heard music while in wild and lonely country, heard his little hammer, or missed something, usually liquor, that wasn't where it was supposed to be. The leprechauns did on rare occasions do good deeds for people. They would often make shoes for children in need, leaving them during the night for the child to find the next morning. At times, 2 widows with hungry children have found gold pieces when their need was great. Usually, though, the leprechauns had more time for pranks and tricks. They loved to hide burrs in saddle blankets so that when the owner of the horse would get on the saddle, the horse would pitch him off. It is said that many a poor Irishman has heard them laugh as he lay on the ground after such a trick. Any unfortunate Irishman who insulted the leprechauns was indeed a sorry man. The leprechaun, if angered, could in the night time put a hump on a person's back or even change the luckless creature into a frog or a rat. Story 39, y'all. Peggy O'Leary and the Leprechauns. Now, Peggy O'Leary was a young lass who lived in County Cork near the town of Odeek. She was a charming girl, witty and easy to look upon, with her raven black hair, green eyes, and rosy complexion. Her mother was dead, and Peggy was housekeeper for her father, Timothy, and two brothers, Pat and Mike. She was wanting to marry with a young bog trotter and peat merchant named Brian O'Neill. Her only difficulty was that her father and two brothers had no use for any O'Neill, and even less than that for the one called Brian. One sunny day, Peggy went for a walk. She stopped by the brook to watch the trout jump for flies, and dozed off to sleep. While she slept, two leprechauns appeared, and were so taken by her beauty that they sat down and gazed upon her. While she was sleeping, tears flowed from her closed eyes. This bothered the leprechauns, and they decided to awaken her and find out the cause of her troubles. Peggy told of the feud between her menfolk and Brian, and how she was unable to bring peace and have the wedding she and Brian wanted so much. The leprechauns gave the matter some thought, and then decided to assist her. They told her to be in the same spot the next day, at the same time, and they would give her what was needed to end the feud. With that, they disappeared. Peggy went home, not knowing for sure that she had not been dreaming the whole thing, but certain that she would be in the same spot at the same time the next day. The next day, she was there, and the two leprechauns came with a large vial of something that looked to be dust. They told her to bake a loaf of bread with the mixture in the vial. Then she was to divide the bread into 4 equal parts, one for her father, one for her brother Pat, one for her brother Mike, and one for Brian O'Neill. After this, bread was eaten, her men would forget all their past differences and look upon each other with mutual love and respect. This she did, and the village of Odeek saw the grandest wedding ever witnessed by Irish eyes. And they still talk of the grand music that was heard, but the source couldn't be seen. This was because the music was furnished by invisible leprechauns. From that day until now, the O'Learys and the O'Neills have been as one, thanks to leprechauns. All right, y'all, this is story number 40. Patrick O'Day and the English. Patrick O'Day was a fun-loving lad as ever walked the peat bogs. He liked fun and frolic, but had a very strong hatred for the king's troops, English soldiers, stationed in the village to maintain control for England. Patrick was constantly breaking English laws. This law-breaking was very easy to do, as the English had made almost everything the Irish people liked to do unlawful. Patrick was always either doing something or thinking of ways to torment the English. The English, in turn, had their own ideas about Patrick O'Day. Their captain had often thought how nice it would be to catch Patrick and have the golden opportunity of seeing him on the gallows, hanging by his neck. But even then, the English could not hang an Irishman unless they could show some good cause. Patrick was, in his way, careful at first. One trick after another, he pulled, and his success made him careless. One night, Patrick went into the captain's quarters, borrowed the captain's spare uniform, and went to an English military ball in honor of a visiting English general. Patrick did well and enjoyed the English food and liquor. He danced with their ladies and really had himself a fine time. But the liquor in his belly affected his brain and his quick wit. Before he realized it, the captain and several other soldiers were on to his act. For a minute, Patrick was sure all was lost. Then, with a long hop and a big jump, he went through the window and landed running. With hue and cry, the soldiers were after him. Patrick was just jumps away from the gallows. The English captain wanted to decorate with him. Try as he would, he couldn't seem to shake his pursuers off his trail. He had indulged in too much fine food and drink and was slowing down, while the English seemed to be moving faster. Patrick was twisting and dodging and trying to find some sort of a hideaway. Suddenly he heard weird music to his left. He rushed into a small clearing and fell flat on his face. His outstretched hands closed around two small objects that he knew had to be leprechauns. Quickly, he told them his troubles and requested their help. They also being Irish, had great dislike for the English and made themselves and Patrick invisible. The English searched all over, but to no avail. Patrick later appeared in another country, in the southern part of Ireland. He had to stay there until his friend, the English captain, was recalled to England. Patrick took great delight in telling of his night at the English ball and of his help from the two leprechauns. Story 41, Don Mike O'Doolan. In the old days, back in the time of my great-great-great-grandfather, Donald Michael O'Doolan, the main form of entertainment was feuding and raiding amongst the different counties of Ireland. Don Mike, as he was called, was the chieftain over the O'Days, O'Neills, McGillicuddies, O'Briens, McDonalds, and the McNeils. His country was raided once by the combined forces of the O'Tooles, McGavins, Fluhardys, and O'Haras. This raid happened early one morning. Don Mike and his followers finally, after several hours of hard fighting, beat off the attack. But in the fighting, Don Mike suffered grievous wounds. A lesser man would have died where he stood. His men carried him home, and his good wife, Sheila, his friends and relatives gathered around to do what could be done. It was said in those days that when an important person was to die, a coal-black coach pulled by 6 fog-gray horses, having a driver and footman dressed in gray, would come to carry the soul to its final judgment. Sheila, who was Sheila O'Shea before she married, knew that her Don Mike was a prospective passenger for the death coach, so she took steps to keep it from arriving. The first night, she had the men cut trees so that the road would be blocked at midnight. The next morning, all the trees were out of the road and in piles, and the road was clearly open. That afternoon, she had the men destroy the only bridge that led to their home. The next morning, there was a new stone bridge that would be impossible to destroy in time. Sheila was desperate and knew not what to do. Suddenly, she remembered a tale told to her by her grandfather about a bracelet he gave her when she was a bride. He told her that he had once favored King Brian of the Leprechauns with a barrel of his best Irish whiskey. King Brian liked it so well that he made Sheila's grandfather a present of a bracelet, telling him that he or his descendants could call King Brian any time by holding the bracelet next to his heart and saying King Brian, the O'Shea, needs your help." Sheila found the bracelet, called King Brian, and he came. Sheila told him her troubles, and King Brian immediately made the O'Doolan household invisible. The night when the coach of death appeared, it was unable to find the house and drove on by. Don Mike, finally, with the help and loving care of Sheila, recovered and lived a long and happy life. Every year on the anniversary of this date, Don Mike sent a barrel of his best Irish whiskey to King Brian. Story 42, Friendship of the Wee People. Many years ago, when my great-great-grandfather and grandmother were just getting their family started, they were having quite a hard time of it one winter. Their potato bin was almost empty, the cornmeal was almost gone, and they had one side of bacon left. In fact, they were just about to the point of having to beg. One day, an old woman came to the door and asked my grandmother if she could have some cornmeal. Grandmother asked her to come into the house and told her that they were low on their supply of meal, but what they had, they would share with her. Then the old woman saw the baking hanging above the fireplace and asked if she might have a bit. Again, grandmother told her that this was their last side of bacon, but she was welcome to part of it. The old lady took some of the cornmeal and part of the bacon, thanked my grandmother, and started to leave. But before she left, she told her benefactor that since she had been so generous with her, even when the family desperately needed what little food she had, she would surely be rewarded. Grandmother said that a reward was not necessary and that she was only glad to help her out. The old woman said, "Ah, but the wee people are obliged." Of course, Grandma told Grandpa, but he just smiled and said nothing. The next morning, the cornmeal barrel was full, and so was the smokehouse. Grandma had indeed been rewarded.